The Soviet Cold War era maths school could become the new model for improving education in Britain. The UK's education minister wants to set up intensive classes for the most talented pupils by benefiting from the USSR's experience.
Primetime's Ewan O'Neill joins us now with more on this story. Ewan, good evening to you, and tell us, what's exactly the idea?
Good evening to both of you. Yes, indeed, it seems to be a case of back to the USSR for the British education system. Now, according to Michael Gove, the Education Secretary, he has given preliminary approval to King's College, one of Britain's most prestigious universities, to go ahead with one particular free school out of many, which will benefit maths students from the country, the very best maths students from around the UK. Now, essentially, what will happen, they will provide in-depth education for the best students in the state system to try and get them ready to do their best at university and beyond. And indeed, they also say the free schools are being implemented to make the gap between state schools and private schools smaller, make that all the better. Now, it will be a sixth form school or just pre-university school. It's being scheduled to open in 2014 under Gove's leadership. Now, it is part of the Free Schools Policy, essentially a programme that was established in 2010 by the Tory and Lib Dem government in order really to allow parents, charities and teachers themselves to write to say what we want to teach in school and take it out of local authorities' system. So essentially they say the teachers know better than the government. Now, these schools, they're going to be highly selective. There's going to be a lot of state exams during the summer. They're going to take into account the results of GCSEs, essentially exams that you do 5 years into secondary school, and there will also be a set of interviews to try and get those best state students. Now, the school will also specialise in other subjects as well as maths, believed to be sciences, especially chemistry, but for the moment it will be maths which is the main subject.
Good evening, Ewan. I was just wondering, what is it that Gove liked so much then about the Soviet educational system?
Well, I think mainly the fact that the classes are likely to be taught by university academics and indeed the best of the undergraduate and postgraduate students themselves, meaning that those maths students from state schools who come in, they have the ability to actually go and sit down with people, the best in the business, the best in maths in the country, and develop their skills on a one-to-one basis in many occasions. They're going to get a lot more in-depth math skills. Now, I'll just give you a bit of background to the schools here. During the Soviet times, the first Russian math school was set up in 1963 by one of the top mathematicians that the world has ever seen this century, and that is Andrei Kolmogorov. Now, he was given the Stalin Prize for maths, the highest award for academics in the country during that time, before he established the school. Now, it's still going strong in the country despite it starting all those years again. 200 students from around the country are chosen, the best of the best, the brightest that the country has to offer. Now, they're given in-depth free maths tuition, as well as some people specialising in chemistry and other sciences, but mainly maths. Now, they are brought from around the country. They're given free education, but they do have to pay for the accommodation. Now, the reason why it's in such demand, there's only 200 places, well, because during Soviet times, the state, they wanted to boast essentially that their system of education was the best in the world. So a lot of money was pumped into getting the best that the country has to offer in these schools. Now, they also had to fulfil a certain goal. The government set very high targets, and they said you really have to reach those, and in most cases they did, meaning that maths was seen as one of the best subjects that the country has to offer. Now, because of these schools, things such as engineering was Russian engineering was seen as perhaps the best in the world, especially during the space race time when the Soviets went up against the Americans to become the first in space. Now that's something that Gove, he sees that as something that should be looked up to and really tried to be implemented again. He's also believed to be a supporter of the total education approach, when no citizen was left behind. Everybody in Soviet times had the right to have an education, and he says that this is what the UK really has to do more of.
I see. I, for one, caught the hungover of brilliant Soviet education when it comes to math. I had an incredible teacher. Unfortunately, he's no longer alive. Still, I find this piece of news slightly confusing because UK education is notorious for being really good all over the world. Why does the UK need this boost?
Well, essentially, education, it is a massive issue in Britain. Elections can be won and lost on the issue. And indeed, one of the most written things in the press, one of the most talked about things in the media is the decline of stuff such as maths, such as sciences, such as English language and literature, trying to get those fundamentals back up to the standard required to get the economy back up to an even better level, because we all know at the moment we're in a state of recession in the UK. They say that the way to getting out of that is by education, is by getting those key subjects up to scratch. Now this has led to what critics say as the building blocks of education, the essentials. Maths is one of those. It really has to get back up to the levels that is associated with something like the 1980s back in Britain, before the 11 plus, the exam you did at 11 to get into secondary or grammar schools. They said the levels back then was much better in these types of subjects. We need to reach those levels once again. Now, it's not only school children, teenagers, who really need to get their numeracy levels up to scratch. The British government is saying this year they did a number of key studies, and they saw that the levels of numeracy were reaching critical levels in the country. They said, quite astoundingly, that government figures that show that almost half the working population of England only have primary school maths levels, essentially saying that by the age of 11 you've understood all the maths you're going to. They also said that millions of people simply struggle to understand things like checks in restaurants, how to pay a household bill, and also how to simply read a train timetable. These are things that really needs to be improved on. And the government say the standard line of "I can't understand maths, I'm not good at maths" isn't good enough anymore. Everybody has to be brought up a notch in order to get the economy back on track, and that's what essentially they're looking back to the USSR for the future of education, and in particular maths education in the United Kingdom, guys.
Yeah, fascinating yet absolutely damning information there. Very interesting though. Thank you so much, Ewan O'Neill.
Thank you.